I'm going to start recording and then Gabrielle can introduce you. Go ahead, Gabrielle.
Do you want me to highlight myself as my video?
I'll spotlight you, but first we're gonna give Gabrielle the floor to introduce you.
Oh, okay, perfect.
Hi everyone. Thanks everyone for joining tonight. During this crazy time, food is always a nice distraction. Thank you to our anonymous sponsor. To let everyone know, we are going to mute everyone, but as Miriam and Eliza said, if you have any questions, feel free to unmute yourself just to jump in and ask a question. It is my pleasure to virtually welcome Miriam Pascal, blogger of Overtime Cook and several cookbooks, and she's going to begin. Thanks, everyone.
Hi. So thanks for joining. This is actually my second Zoom cooking demo of the day, so I feel like I have some good experience for today. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Miriam Pascal. I have a blog, overtimecook.com, with, actually, if you're not familiar with it, you will be very excited to discover there's over 500 totally free recipes on there. So go check that out. I also have an Instagram page, Overtime Cook, a Facebook group where I answer questions about cooking and my recipes specifically. That's called Overtime Cook Recipes. You can search, you can join the group. Well, you know, I'll be happy to have you there. If anyone's in the group, could shout out in the chat. So I'm gonna cook a couple of recipes today from my new cookbook, More Real Life Kosher Cooking. This came out in November, actually December. But what I'm gonna do is just show you a couple of variations and tricks along the way. I really tried to keep quarantine cooking in mind. I can definitely relate if you're having trouble getting any ingredients or anything. Personally, I had some trouble getting a few of the things for tonight, so we may make some changes along the way, and that's fine. So, you know, you can ask if there's something specific you don't have, but we're going to get started. So the first thing we're going to make is we're going to start with some of the components for this. So there's steak and pepper salad. We're going to make this as a chicken salad. And one of the things I always love is to offer recipes that do double duty. I'm actually going to position myself a little bit better here. So let's see. Just wanting to be able to see what I'm doing. One of the things I love is when you have a recipe that can do double duty. So what that means is that we're going to make a salad dressing, which will also be a marinade for grilled chicken. And you can use this as just a grilled chicken recipe and just make that for a really delicious dinner. Or you can, you can assemble the whole thing and make the full salad. So, good. So if you're cooking along with me, I'm going to try to bear that in mind and tell you what I'm doing as I go. So I'm just getting out my cutting board here, and I am putting a slightly damp paper towel under it. And what that does is it prevents it from moving around. Right. So this is probably I would say my current favorite knife. It's a Sentoku knife. I'm going to keep it really sharp. So we're going to start by making the dressing / marinade, which is going to, like I said, do double duty. You can definitely double this if you want, and that will give you the option to marinate other things in it. So for example, tonight we're going to marinate some grilled chicken in it, but you can marinate a steak, stick it in the freezer, and then whenever you're ready, pull that steak out. It's already ready to go. Just stick it on the grill, either outdoors, indoors, and it's really simple. So, I'm going to start with some fresh dill. Now I'm not measuring exactly. You can if you'd like. I believe the recipe was sent to you, but I'll tell you the amounts as I go. So this is 3/4 of a cup. And I'm going to chop that up. So if you're not so familiar, ooh, this is actually a really good view. compared to doing a demo in real life. You're pretty far from what I'm doing. So if you're not familiar with holding like a big chef knife like this, or this is actually a Sentoku knife, the way you want to hold it is 3 fingers on the blade, your thumb and one finger on, 3 fingers on the handle, your thumb and 1 finger on the blade. If you're doing this at home, if you have a knife like this, normally at a demo in real life, I say to come up and try at the end. But if you have a knife like this at home and you usually hold it like this, if you switch to holding it this way, you'll see that you really have so much more control. And then when you're holding the food that you're chopping, what you want to do is put your fingers, curl your fingers inward like this, so that even if you go right up against your fingers, if your fingers are like that, they can get cut, but if they're curled inward, they will not. So I'm going to start by chopping this dill. I'm just going to roll it up to make it a little easier to chop. So we're just going to put that chop here, a little bit the other way. You can do this a little finer, a little coarser, depending on how you like it. It is for salad dressing, so you want to bear that in mind. So you want it pretty fine. And just going to get that into the bowl. And next, I'm going to mince up some garlic. So the way I like to do garlic is to use a microplane. I do it with a knife sometimes, but the reason I like to use a microplane is, especially for a salad dressing, if you don't want like pieces of garlic, you don't want to bite into garlic, it makes it very, very fine. So that's nice. You're ordering one right now? Okay, amazing. So I'm just going to grate this right in here. And it's also really easy, so that's a nice benefit as well, especially if you're not as confident with knife skills. See that? And nice and fine. So yeah, if you don't have one of these, it's an amazing thing to have also for zesting lemons, oranges, whatever. So we're doing 4 cloves of garlic. And we did 3/4 cup of dill. And I'm doing this first because I do want, we're going to grill the chicken in a little bit, but I want to give it the maximum amount of time to marinate. If we weren't cooking in real time, which I specifically wanted to do, I would probably let this marinate a couple of hours overnight. But because I want this all to happen in real time, so like I mentioned, I did this is my second Zoom demo of the day. So in the first one, it was really amazing. Everybody at the end like showed off what they had made, and their plates looked just like mine, so it was really fun. So I hope that you're cooking along with me. So we have the garlic in there. Now we're going to juice 2 lemons. If at any point you have trouble seeing what I'm doing, let me know. I have another way to show you. So maybe. Okay. So question is if there's any specific company that I recommend. Axo is, I don't even know if, I don't think this one's Axo. This one is, I don't know, it doesn't say the brand, but Axo is in general a good company. Okay, so I get asked when I call for fresh lemons, people ask me all the time, like, can I use lemon juice from a bottle? And the answer is that you could, but it's just nowhere near the same. Ooh. I pressed that a little too hard. So what you want to do, you see the difference, how this has like no give, and this one, I mean, I went a little too far, but this one is nice and squishy. That means we release the juices. So I, really put some weight into it, and these lemons are good. I never had this happen before. So we're going to juice 2 lemons. Any questions? If anyone has questions, the chat is not the best way to ask me, by the way. I had that in the previous demo, like I really couldn't keep up with the chat, so just unmute yourself to ask me. So anyway, I am going to juice these lemons. And again, using bottled lemon juice will be okay, but nowhere near the same. It doesn't compare. So Get those 2 lemons juiced. And salads like this, which are, you know, more than just 1 or 2 quick steps, I think of them as kind of like Shabbos day salads. That's the category in my head. It's like salads that are, you know, a little bit more effort. They're definitely nicer. I would not make this for a standard weeknight dinner. This is something that I make for either Shabbos lunch. I'll always make some kind of nicer salad like this with either grilled chicken or grilled steak. It's either for Shabbos lunch, for a Yontif meal, or for some kind of special occasion. It is a great meal in one, but it's like a good amount of work for, I mean, I guess if this is your whole meal, then it's not too bad, actually. Next up, we're gonna get some olive oil. So this calls for, is that a half a cup or a third of a cup? Third of a cup of olive oil. So I'm just gonna eyeball this. If you're more comfortable measuring, go for it. So if you follow me on Instagram, if you don't, you should, Overtime Cook, you've for sure seen my salt box. People ask me about it all the time. It's a bamboo salt box. The nice thing about it is that the bamboo actually absorbs extra moisture and keeps your salt from getting like wet or sticky or whatever. Salt, and there's honey also. So the salt I keep in the bamboo salt box. I also get asked a lot of questions about salt in general, because people often ask, you know, about, I call for kosher salt in all my recipes, basically. And if you're using table salt, it's important to realize it's not comparable. Table salt is much saltier than kosher salt. Anyway, I'm just gonna give that a quick whisk.
How much honey did you
So, oh, thank you. I put in, it calls for 1.5 tablespoons of honey. Now again, I eyeballed the ingredients here. So what I'm gonna do is just taste it to make sure I got all the flavoring right, which is always important when you cook. Just to make sure that you're tasting as you go. This is great. So what we're going to do now is separate out a little bit. Let's put this aside. Let's cut up the chicken. Show you. This is my chicken knife. I use it occasionally for other things. Let me just go, it's a better angle. I do use it occasionally for other things, but it's amazing for chicken. It's a Cutco knife that was gifted to me by Aviva. Her Instagram is Remember Me Home. She sells Cutco knives, and she gifted me this one, and I love it, for chicken especially, but for a lot of things. And what I'm doing, if you can see, is I'm just cutting it along the width to make thinner cutlets, especially because we're marinating it for a short amount of time. I want to, I want it to be thinner. My bag. Now you can do more. I'm only going to grill 2 chicken cutlets here. It really goes right through. It's amazing. actually, just because why not? It's going to be great, like leftover tomorrow. You can eat it like hot as grilled chicken. You can put it in salad. There. Put this away for later. I do demo this in a shul. It's very hard because I can't wash my hands after handling raw chicken, so I have to like wear gloves and focus like 1,000% on not touching anything. It's very hard, but when I do it in the kitchen, I can actually wash my hands, so that's nice. So I'm gonna pour probably about 1/3 of the marinade. Maybe I'll do a little more, maybe half, into this bag, and then I don't know. Is there a culinary term that's a little bit more proper than smush? That's what I'm gonna do here. You want to get that distributed so that all the chicken can get the delicious lemon dill flavor, and then I'm going to put this aside while we move on with the recipe. So do we have any questions on the dressing and the marinating the chicken before I move on? If so, please let me know now. I guess we don't. Quiet here. Okay. Next, so this is called a steak and pepper salad, or in today's case, a chicken and pepper salad. So next up, I'm going to...
Miriam, somebody's asking how much salt did you use?
Oh, so the recipe calls for a teaspoon of kosher salt. Now again, if you're using table salt or sea salt, like fine sea salt, you'll want to use less because it's much saltier. Anyway, we're going to move on to the pepper mixture. So I'm going to get out a frying pan. Just thinking. So I'm using a really big frying pan, which will help cook this quickly. But if you don't have it, that's okay. You just may have to adjust the cook time a little bit. So we're going to start with an onion. Ooh. Not sure if we're going to need this later. I think my worst fear when I'm cooking is that I'm going to put something in the sink and then need it again, and then I have to wash it like an extra time. It's like, is there anything worse? Okay, so we're going to start out with slicing an onion. Now, again, just holding my knife with my fingers on the blade, which is giving me a lot more control over it. And then I'm just going to have it. And then here's what science tells us. You would think there's 2 ways to slice the onion, right? So science says no. There's one right way and one wrong way. So, let's see. This way to slice an onion, according to science, is wrong because of the way the onion cells are shaped. It's actually much preferable to slice it this way. So, I learned that from Food Lab. Once I converted, I have to say I like onion slices way better. They somehow slice nicer. So we're just gonna slice this onion. Did you know that?
No.
See, you learned something new today.
Yeah.
And then once I get like 2/3 of the way through, I go the other way. So here we go. So I am going to share my screen. Devorah, I'm thinking maybe you'll video it. Second. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to put on the phone of my camera. I mean the camera of my phone. So here, I'm going to come over.
Get into this, right?
What?
We can get into
No,
this.
it's only showing
On the camera?
Yeah. This is not. What? Yeah. So there we are. So I'm going to just put some oil in there. The pan is nice and hot already. I believe it calls for 2 tablespoons. If you want to, reduce the fat in the recipe, you can definitely use less. But 2 tablespoons is definitely the amount that I would recommend. Just going to add these. And I like to let them cook for a bit. And my favorite kitchen tool, by the way, from IKEA. I have like 40 of them, except for when I burn them. Then I have 39 and 38. And then when I go to IKEA, I buy more. So we're gonna let this cook. I'm gonna stop sharing screen so you could go to the other side. What? Yeah, it'll melt. But I'm gonna take it off in a minute. Okay. So we're back to here. Untangle this cord. So while that cooks, the other thing that science tells us is that come back there and talk. In order to cook the onions nicely and get them nice and caramelized, the best way to go about it is to add salt early on in the cooking process. So that's what I did. I added, it calls for 1.5 teaspoons of kosher salt. Do you want to mince the garlic into there? Yeah. It calls for 4 cloves. No, because I'm blocking them. I'm big enough to block you. Okay, so now I'll slice up some peppers. So what I like to do, can you hear me over the sound of the onions cutting? Can someone speak up and let me know?
Yes.
Okay. I'm trying to bear in mind to only talk when I'm close enough to the camera that you can hear. So what I like to do when I'm cutting up the peppers is just to bear in mind the shape of the onions, because when things are all one shape, they cook nicer. So sometimes I just sort of look at the vegetable and say how are we going to do that? And for this, I think the best way is going to be to cut the peppers in half lengthwise, make 2 shorter strips because they're much longer than onion slices. So I'm just going to do it like that, and then we get strips that are relatively similar to the size of the onion. Now the key with the peppers is that you don't want the peppers to be mushy, obviously. So we let the onions cook for quite a bit. We want them to get really nice and caramelized, or at least really get some good color and let the flavor intensify. And then we add the peppers and we cook that much more briefly so that the peppers don't get mushy, because that would not be enjoyable. So this. I'll show you in a minute what the onions look like before we move on to the peppers. So again, with the orange pepper, I'm going to change the shape that I'm cutting to match the onions. So for this one, I'm just going to do slices because it's, small. I have to say that when you do an order from the grocery for delivery, I appreciate that, it's not easy times right now. So I appreciate that I don't have to go to the grocery, but it's a very new experience for me to have someone else do my shopping. I get messages all the time from readers, followers who say oh, my husband did the shopping for me and he bought this and it's wrong, but now what can I do with it? And I finally can relate. because, you know, they sent me things that I'm like, that's not what I wanted. I'm gonna stir it. Yeah. So I'm having my assistant here give the onions a stir. You don't want to forget about them, especially because we have it on a pretty high flame, which is going to help it, you know, get to the point that we want a little faster. If you're not under time pressure, you know, which means that you don't have 40 people watching you, you can definitely go at a lower flame and take your time. You know, let it go for 20, 30 minutes while you're doing something else. That's really ideal. It's less risky, but you don't have that kind of time here. So we're gonna just let it go. How's that look? Okay, so let's screen share again. I'll show you where we're up to with the onions. Pretty good system with the screen sharing, right? Someone gave me an idea. I think it was pretty clever. Okay, so here we go. Here's onions. As you see, they have some color. I just saw a discussion today on Facebook about how people say that it doesn't, like, you know, getting onions caramelized. Like, recipe people lie about how long it takes. So, you know, you're all witnesses. This is real time. It does help that I have a very large pan. The larger amount of surface area definitely helps the onions cook faster. So I do understand that it might not peak as fast if you're using a smaller frying pan. So now I'm just going to add the peppers, and we're going to let this go for about 3 minutes, long enough for the peppers to get a little soft, but they definitely want them to still have some bite to it and not be mushy. So let's add this in. In case you see that I'm forgetting about it, please point that out to me, because I do have a tendency to forget, especially when there's witnesses. Okay, let's stop this. Well, thank you. All right, so we're actually going to put this aside for now, and we're going to come back to it in a little bit. I'm going to actually work on the next recipe, trying again just to maximize time here and get things going as quickly as I can. So I'm going to switch gears now and work on my smashed potatoes. So if you're cooking along with me, we asked you to prepare the potatoes ahead of time, and that is what we're going to be using now. So first, let's prepare the topping. So, if you're following along, this is what we're making a version of. So this is called corned beef top smashed potatoes. This recipe is super popular. Again, I like to do this for like a yentith meal or sometime when you have a lot of guests and you want to do something a little bit extra. So quarantine cooking means that instead of corned beef, we're using pastrami because that's what I have. I have vacuum packed pastrami in my fridge, so we're gonna make use of it. Okay, so we're going to, here, you have to get off. All right, so here's the pepper mixture. As you see, the peppers are not soft, but they're somewhat cooked. And this is ready. So we're gonna let it cool completely because we don't want hot stuff in the salad. And I've got another frying pan out. So we're gonna dice up another onion now. I hope you guys like sauteed onions as much as I do. So we're gonna dice up another onion now. And this time, instead of slicing it, we're going to do a dice. If anyone has any questions, please ask while I dice up this onion. I am happy to answer. If you're cooking along with me and you're a little unclear of anything at this point, let me know. So the truth about this recipe is that it was originally a pastrami topped smashed potato recipe. And then I decided that so many kosher recipes use pastrami that I said, you know what, I want to do something different. So I turned it into a corned beef recipe, which I don't regret. But anyway, we're back to the original now, so that's funny. Now the recipe calls for 3 onions. In the interest of saving time, I'm going to cut it down and use only 1. Also because I'm going to show you, oh man, I forgot to turn the oven on. There. So we're preheating the oven to 400. My bedroom door is closed, right? Okay. Smoke alarm will go off. Okay, so we're preheating the oven to 400. Dicing up the onion. And again, if you don't have a nice knife like this, it's such a worthwhile investment because it's going to make everything go so much faster. I'm going to go back to sharing on our comment. So, that. So, I have a frying pan here. I'm adding some oil. The recipe calls for a tablespoon. I probably use a little bit more. That's okay. And we're going to add some onions. Without burning myself this time. The fun thing about burning yourself is that the more you do it, the less you notice. Like birds and everything, they're one at. So, just adding that. See how much salt we're going to add. Okay, so the recipe calls for a teaspoon of kosher salt. So we're going to add some salt. And again, you want to add it early on in the cooking process. It helps the onions break down. It helps them cook nicer and get caramelized better. So add that right away. I'm gonna mince up some garlic. Did you put the garlic in? So as you may have noticed, I like garlic a lot. I'm cutting down on the quantities here. Just so I did less onions, so I'm also doing a little bit less garlic. I'm going to do 2 cloves instead of the 4 that the recipe calls for. And this, by the way, is on a medium heat if you're cooking along with me. So, anyway, add that in. Let's try to get again, the recipe calls for 12 ounces of sliced deli. I'm using 6 because I'm not making a full recipe of the topping, and I'll show you why soon. But if you want to make the full recipe, you'll want to do 2 packages, not 1, like I'm going to do. Okay. Stop sharing. Okay. So no questions so far. We're doing good. Nobody has any questions.
I have a question.
You have a question?
Is that like a lemon zester used for the garlic?
Yes.
Okay.
Microplane, lemon zester, exactly.
Okay. Would have never thought of that.
You cook it with a garlic press, but that's just like one more thing that you need to own. And I don't know if you could tell from this setup here, but my kitchen is quite small. So the fewer things I own, the better. There's a few kitchen gadgets that I kind of want to buy, but I've had to limit what I own to, you know, whatever I can fit. So it's just, I find it unnecessary. So we're going to dice this up. So the way I like to do it when it's long like that is just to, oh, 1 second. So what I just did is I cut it in half, and I'm stacking it just to make it go a little faster. This is, by the way, also a Cutco knife. It's not so necessary for cold meat like this, but if you're slicing roast, oh, it's amazing. It's a meat slicer. Again, it was gifted to me by Aviva, Remember Me Home on Instagram, who sells Cutco knives. And it does such a fantastic job. So I'm going to go ahead and add this back in.
What kind of knife is that?
This is a Cutco meat slicer.
Oh, I have it. It's amazing.
It's like if you've ever struggled to cut your roast or
Yeah,
your
it's
steak or
amazing.
whatever, it's life-changing. So I just added the pastrami in. Okay. I'm actually just going to move my laptop a little closer here. So, can you see? Oh, there it is. Okay. Okay, so here I have this. So now I'm going to add 2 tablespoons of mustard. I believe the recipe calls for deli mustard. I'm using spicy brown because that's what I have. This measuring cup set, by the way, is amazing. I use it for everything. It's called Prep Works by Progressive. It's a 19-piece set. It includes things like 3/4 of a cup, 2/3 of a cup, or in this case, 1/8 of a cup, which is 2 tablespoons. So it's very handy. So that's going right in there. It also calls for, put in some soy sauce, a tablespoon of soy sauce. 2 teaspoons of rice vinegar. So I'm just going to use the tablespoon measurer just to make it easier, and I'm just not going to fill it up all the way. It also calls for a tablespoon of brown sugar, so I'm going to measure for that. So let's do this in, then I'll add the brown sugar. And the brown sugar is going to add some color, just a little bit of sweetness. It's definitely not a sweet recipe, but if you have, you know, an issue specifically with sugar, you can leave it out, absolutely. Or if honey is preferable to sugar, you can use that instead. But again, it's 1 tablespoon, so we're not talking about a lot. It's not a sweet recipe. It's just to balance everything out. Okay, so let's see. That's where we're at now. Let me get some brown sugar. I've had these OXO pop containers. Best. I love them. What? I'm surprised you don't have them.
I do. I said I have
Oh.
one every, yeah.
They just said no.
Yeah.
Oh. All right, so in goes the brown sugar. And I'm just going to stir that in. And we're going to let this cook down for a bit. The truth about this recipe is that the longer we let this particular mixture cook for, the better it'll taste. So again, when we're cooking live on a cooking demo, you know, we don't have the luxury of letting it go, but if you're in your kitchen doing other things, it's a great idea to just let it cook for a while you do other things, and then it just deepens the flavor, and it really is amazing. So while that's cooking, as long as we have time for it to cook, let me show you what we're going to do next. So, smash some potatoes. You ever make smashed potatoes?
I made them, yeah. Right.
Made these?
I actually think I did.
Made this recipe?
Yeah. But I think that I'm making it again.
What?
Making it again.
Oh, okay. Well, you can take this home with you. What? Okay. A little tip, by the way. Slide it around. Mush it up. Just in time. So, let me show you what we're going to do here. So in this pot, I have the water, wow, the potatoes that I boiled. So here they are. They're baby potatoes. They are boiled until fork tender, which is what I had asked them to, you know, the message that I asked for you to get. So here's what I like to do to make them extra crispy and delicious. Before I smash them or anything else, I'm going to take some olive oil and I'm going to drizzle it in here. You know, a little more is better if you can afford the calories. Since I'm not eating it, I can afford as many calories as the next. And then I'm going to stir this up. And you want to try to get these potatoes coated in a layer of oil. And that will just really, really get them super crispy and delicious. So now that I did that, I'm going to take half of these potatoes. Remember, I told you that there's a reason that I am making a smaller amount of the filling. And the reason is that I'm going to show you. Remember, I told you I love double duty recipes, right? I want you to cook once and eat twice. So I'm going to show you a double duty recipe here. I'm going to get the oil off my hands. Okay. So I've never made smashed potatoes. Smashing is the most satisfying part of it. Put some parchment paper on top of the potatoes. The second cookie sheet here. And you want to do guys? You're going to go for it. Fun. Just gonna, you know, put your weight on there. Smash it. And then, what, how do you do it? Individually?
Yeah.
Oh man, are you glad you're here?
Yeah.
So sometimes the smaller potatoes
Don't get smashed.
don't get so smashed, so then those I'll take a measuring cup or something and I'm just going to smash them individually. So still a huge time saver. Okay, kind of want to eat a potato now, to be honest. So, ready for my double duty secret recipe within a recipe? Remember this. So we're going to use this as a topping for the smashed potatoes as well. So we're going to use some for the salad. Now, if you want the full amount for the salad, you would have to double this, but I'm going to save probably about 2/3 for the salad. Put some, about 1/3 of it. Oh, these onions are so nicely caramelized. Wow, good job. So, It's a good bonus recipe, right? Yeah. So if you want to make this on its own, not for the salad, I would dice the onions and peppers instead of slicing them. It is a little bit big and clumsy like this, but it's convenient, so I allow it. So this is ready to go. This is ready to go. And I'm going to stick this into the oven. I don't remember how long it takes for. Okay, this is 30 minutes, so we'll try that and see how it goes. Sheet. We're going to so just to let you know what I'm doing, I turn the flame on this pastrami mixture up all the way, just to try to let it go a little faster. Because we're going to keep that in a minute so we can move on. And let's smash these. How's it looking? That's good. So, smash this. And this one is going to get smashed so up. So I'm going to resmash the corner here. Better. Once I do that, then I, space them out so they're evenly distributed. When you want things to roast nicely and get good crispy texture, the most important thing is that they shouldn't be too packed together, because then they get steamy instead of crispy. Okay. Any questions before we move on?
Yeah, I have a question.
Sure.
What kind of baking sheets are you using?
Oh, thank you. I love talking about this. If you follow me on Instagram, you know that I am very anti-disposable baking sheets. They will not get you the crispy results that they will not get you the kind of crispy results that you get from real baking sheets. But these are my personal favorite, which is Nordic Ware. Why is this so loose? Sorry, give me 1 minute. I'm trying to. Okay. Better. All right. The camera angle is a little wonky. You want to hold it up from there. I'm just going to share my screen again and show you this. I don't know how many of you are cooking along with me, but if you are, you should be smelling the amazing smell of the pastrami here. Now, normally I would say let it cool and then you could use your hands to do this, but in the interest of saving time, we're gonna not use our hands. So I'm just going to spoon some of this mixture on top of the potatoes.
Miriam, what was the type of measuring cups that came in the whole set? What was the measuring cups?
Progressive. I'm going to show you in a minute. Remind me if I forget. They're amazing. It's a 19-piece set, so it has like, an eighth of a cup, a quarter of a cup, a third of a cup, 2/3 of a cup, 3/4 of a cup. Like, it has all of the measurements. So instead of having to measure out like a third of a cup twice or a quarter of a cup 3 times, you just have a cup for it. It sounds pretty simple, but If you bake often, it's kind of life-changing. It's so much easier. So I'm a huge fan. Now, one thing I will say, I've bought many sets over the years. The handles sometimes break off, which is where it says what the measurement is. In most cases I remember, but the truth is that I have replaced the set over the years. I think once, and then I bought a second set just when I had a team working in my kitchen on my cookbook. I needed, you know, higher capacity, so I bought an extra set. But they do break off, but I'm going to show you the set in just a second. Let me stick this in the oven. We're almost there.
Can you
Pretty good, right?
using the small like yellow potatoes, or if you use red potatoes, let's say quartered, or this is the suggested?
Yeah, so if you want the smashed effect, you definitely want to use baby potatoes. That being said, it does not have to be red. You can use red, yellow/white, or purple, or some stores sell like a mixture. You could definitely use that. Let me just stick this in the oven. Okay. So you can definitely use a mixture.
I'm sorry to interrupt. You use Cutco knives. I also have used them. The question is, how do you sharpen your knives? What's the best way to sharpen knives?
So the Cutco knives, officially, you're not supposed to sharpen yourself, which is the one thing I don't love about them. I have a few brands of knives, not only Cutco. I'm going to show you. So I've got, this is really my favorite knife. I just lately have been using this a lot and I really like it. So this is a global knife. It's called the Global G29. It's actually technically bigger than a chef's knife. It's, I think, called a meat and fish slicing knife, I think. It's huge, and I have big hands, so I like it. It's huge and heavy, and it kind of really helps you like get into like big things. This one is actually a company that I've worked with, full disclosure. They're not paying me to say this, but they gave me this knife for free, and I've done some sponsored work for them. The company is called Chef Wave. The knives are very affordable. Like this one is $150. This one is between $70 and $80, I would say. So it's definitely much more in the affordable range. So, you know, they're great. If you type Chef Wave into Google, you'll find their website or you'll find their products on Amazon. I've been very happy with them. So let me show you the knife sharpener I use. Can you see? This is called Any Sharp. Again, you can just search for this on Amazon. It has this V. I can actually share my screen so I can show you more close up. So the trick with sharpening the knife is that you want to make sure that you have the right angle. So what happens with this is that you see there's this V that guides you. So what you do is you sharpen the knife, it's on there, you sharpen the knife against that V, and it guides you to get the angle correctly, and then you go back and you do it the other side. I don't want to use the knife I'm currently using just because you have to wash it after, so I don't want to do that. But this is called Any Sharp, and I'm very, very happy with it. So that's what? Yeah, so it has a suction, so it holds onto your counter, and I'm very happy with it. So definitely something to look at. It is very important if you have good knives to take care of them. I would like to get my knives professionally sharpened, because as much as sharpening them yourself is good, it's good to get them professionally sharpened from time to time. Okay, let us move on. Let's grill the chicken. So I'm going to do this in a grill pan, but you can do it in the oven. I'll show you. I just have the oven at 400, and I'm going to use a grill pan instead. So the various ways to cook the chicken, you can use a grill pan like I'm going to do here. You can do it under the broiler, or you can bake it at 400 to 425 for probably about, depending on the thickness, between 15 and 20 minutes, even less if it's really thin. You definitely don't want to overbake it. But I'm gonna, because I have other stuff in the oven, I'm gonna do the chicken on the grill pan. Deborah, you want to come help me? Thank you. So glad that you. I thought you were here to eat. Okay. Get off. All right, so I have my grill pan, really, really hot. I'm actually going to wait a minute. So again, this part of the recipe is different because the recipe in the book calls for steak, but I'm using chicken. You can also, by the way, do this on an outdoor grill. That would be amazing. I'm going to spray this. It should actually be fine without spraying it, but I feel like it's one of those situations where it can't hurt. So I'm going to give that a good spray. Do you have enough? Definitely hot enough in this kitchen. Yeah. Do you want me to turn on the AC? No. Yeah, sure. It's probably like 80 degrees. Okay. So, that sizzle, that's what we want to hear. I hope I can hear. Okay. So close. So, you guys hear?
Yes.
So the main thing is to hear that sizzle, because you know that's what you're looking for. So I'm gonna let this go for about a minute or two on a really high temperature. Then we'll turn it down so it can cook through. So meanwhile, get down the platter to do the plate up the salad. What are you gonna say? Should we use this one? This one. Any votes? Top or bottom? You vote bottom. Okay. Love that. The eye was there. Yes.
No one's answering.
No one's answering. Fair point. Let's flip the chicken and we'll turn it down so it can cook through. So, that's a nice filmer. Ooh, smells amazing now. Okay, so I'm going to let it go for a minute, then we'll turn it down so it can get cooked all the way through. And meanwhile, I'm going to stop that sharing. Great, my phone just landed in the sink. Let's talk about plating up the salad really pretty. So, get out the lettuce. Okay. So again, quarantine cooking, you can use whatever salad greens you have. I personally happen to have romaine in my house, so that's what we're using, but you can do this with arugula, spring mix, whatever you like. So I'm just going to put this on the bottom here. Ooh, turning down the chicken so it can cook through. If I forget the chicken, feel free to remind me because I can be very forgetful sometimes. Let's see. Next up, so this salad, the funny thing about the salad is that I actually struggled with the crunch in it because I added like nuts and I felt like it just totally didn't go. And I added various crouton type things and I wasn't happy with it either. And then I don't remember how I came up with the idea of using snow peas. I happen to love snow peas, by the way. Raw and cooked, they're awesome. But I had the idea to use snow peas, which add such a great crunch. And I was like, this is the winner. So I'm just cutting out, to cut them into thirds so they're more bite-sized. Chicken. Just put flipping the chicken again so that on the lower temperature, so it cooks through on both sides. Okay, so I have the stew of peas. See if any of these avocados are. Ooh, nice. Okay. Use this one. So I'm going to tell you something funny about food styling. Now, this is not presentation, because when you're styling something to eat, like we're doing here, this is not a good trick. But when you're, ooh, look at that, beautiful. When you're styling avocado for a picture, the interesting trick is that I always use avocados that are not ripe yet, because they slice beautifully. They have to be just ripe enough that the peel will come off and they won't look really gross, but you would not want to eat the avocado in the picture of the salads. Like sometimes I'll literally have like take the picture, take it off and put a ripe avocado. But this happens to be perfect, but sometimes with the more ripe ones, they're just not so beautiful and they don't cut so nicely. So I just took the peels off, and then I'm just going to slice this. You can cut it, however you like. I'm keeping in mind the shape of the onions and peppers, which are long. So to me, the long kind of slices really make sense. So I'm just doing that with the other one. Okay. Am I forgetting anything? So I took the chicken off. We're going to let it cool just a little bit. Sorry, what?
There's a question in the chat. What kind of grill pan do you recommend?
So I happen not to love this one. I just have it, and like, the type of where you just get used to something and you don't bother replacing it. So that's kind of where I am with this one. I don't love it, but I think it's Cuisinart. It was on sale on Amazon, so I bought it, and it's fine. It's not bad enough to replace, but it's not like extra special that I would recommend it. If you have hold on, I'm sorry, I'm going to switch to camera view so you can see this better while I clean this up. So if you have a cast iron one, it will really make like beautiful sear. But if you don't, a nonstick one like this is definitely, it's lower maintenance, which is also a bonus. Okay, so I'm just gonna not bother with that. I'm gonna let you. So what I like to do with the salad, sometimes I like to go very linear, but sometimes I like to kind of go a little bit more wavy to add some visual interest. So instead of doing a straight line of things, as you see, I'm making it kind of uneven. So put that there. Now, I always try to think before I put it on, because you don't want to regret your choice of where to put it, and because you kind of get one shot at this. So I'm going to put this over here. Now, what I like to do with avocado, that's not nice looking. What I like to do with avocado is to separate the halves, just taking it off gently, and then I like to fan it out a little bit, and I like to put the two halves separately, just to, again, to me it adds a little bit of visual interest. So when I serve salads like this, where I put in all that extra effort to make all these components, in this case it's the dressing, the pepper mixture, cutting up the stuff, and then the chicken. It's a few steps, so I like to show off once I'm doing it. So now I left these for the chicken. I'm just going to wash my chicken knife that had raw chicken so I can cut the cooked chicken again. So bear with me for a minute. So now again, this is one of those things where I have to pay attention. This is one of those things where ideally we would be waiting because the chicken will not slice as nicely. Oh, beautiful. Juicy. It will not slice as nicely when it's so hot, even though this knife is amazing. As you see, it actually is slicing beautifully. So what I'm going to do is, again, just kind of fan that out a little bit. I want the grill marks to show, so I'm going to put it this way. Now I'll pick another salad. Are you going to make this?
I'm making this.
Really? Okay. Expect it. Expect it, the Shabbos.
I'm making this. Maybe we should make it for Shabbos.
I thought you were like going to make food when I come to your house.
I know. It's like,
Okay.
yeah, you have to.
So again, I'm just going to let the grill marks show. And then I'm going to, there's some room there, so I'm going to do one more piece. And if you noticed, for pay attention, to make sure you show them what I'm doing. If you notice, I'm cutting the strips opposite of the grill marks, just again to add visual interest. So these are just all things I like to think about. Like if presentation is something that you want to focus on, these are just some extra tips. So, oh, doesn't that look stunning? Oh, okay. I have to take a picture too. If I would take a picture, it didn't happen. And then what I'm going to do with the dressing is drizzle it over. Now, when I'm serving this, let's say for a Shabbos meal, so before the meal, before everybody comes, I'll plate it just like this, and then right before, I'll drizzle the dressing over, and then like I'll bring it to the table like this because I'm showing off, and I want everybody to be like, ooh, that's pretty. But then I think it's very important to toss the salad because otherwise you don't enjoy it as much. You don't get all the things together. So after everybody sees it and is impressed, then I toss. So we'll add the dressing after, but that's basically what I would do with the dressing. I'm going to check on the first batch of smashed potatoes. Okay, here we go. I think I'm going to give it another couple minutes. So we're going to start making dessert meanwhile. Before I move on to dessert, let me stop sharing. So before I move on to dessert, this is a good time to ask any questions that you have on whatever we've done so far, because we're going to totally switch gears now. So
I have a question about you mentioned the cast iron grill pan, which I have, but I don't feel like I ever clean it right. Is there a trick to cleaning it?
the truth is that I don't feel like I ever clean it right either, which is the reason I don't use it so much. I have one. The truth is that my father is very into cast iron, and he would probably be very disappointed with me that I don't use it much, but it is very hard to clean, and I also feel like it's never clean enough. So like you should not get cast iron to bar. You gotta flip the thing on to just to cool, yeah. It's a little, what temperature is in here? What does it say?
76.
What?
76.
76? It feels hotter, no? Probably because I'm like standing right by all these burners on. Okay, so yeah, cast iron, it's like intense. You have to really baby it, and you have to work on it, and it's a totally different thing. So I personally don't use mine much, but if if you Google like cast iron tutorials, you'll find there are a bunch of them. Any other questions before we move on to dessert? I'm very excited to show you this dessert because it's super duper easy. And so versatile, which is what I love to demonstrate, is things that are very versatile. Whew, okay, so I'm gonna move you. Sorry, what?
If you don't like dill, what could you use instead for this recipe?
That's a good question. A different herb, maybe basil would be really good. You could do parsley, it just won't be so strong. I would say basil would probably be your best bet.
Great, thank you.
I have another question.
Sure.
How do you feel about the frozen cubes if you don't have fresh?
Okay, so that's a great question. Sorry, give me 1 second. I'm just gonna move you guys to the other counter for the dessert. So, so the answer about the frozen cubes is that they're definitely not the same, but they are a decent substitute when you don't have, when you don't have the choice of using fresh. Specifically for something like this, as opposed to like a salad where you really want like the fresh feel of the green herbs, but something like this where it's chopped up so fine, I actually find that it works pretty well.
Is there a certain substitute for it? Meaning like how many cubes per, compared with there?
It says on the package, I'm not sure. The truth is that your best bet is to just try it and taste it and adjust as needed. Tasting recipes as you go, especially if you're making adjustments, is always your best bet. So the first tip about this dessert that I'm making, I just don't want to forget to mention this, is that we're going to whip up a par whip right now. It's actually not going to work if there's anything in your bowl. So I noticed, because we just finished washing this right before, from my previous demo, right before I started this one, and I noticed that it hadn't dried properly. So I just dried it really well, because again, it will not work if there's water in the bowl. In fact, about 10 minutes before I started this, my sister called me. She said she just whipped up a whip for a cake that my niece is making, and it didn't work. What could be the problem? And I said, was there water in the bowl? And she said, probably. And I said, that is the problem. So I'm using Power Whip. I do want to specify, this is a 16-ounce container. I want to specify that if you're, for whatever reason, not for whatever reason, if you're making this for a dairy meal, for example, if you want to make this as a Shavuos dessert, you can absolutely use whipped cream, and it'll be heavy whipping cream instead of Power Whip, and it'll be absolutely fantastic. But because we're doing a fleshig meal here, we're going to use Power Whip, and it'll actually still be really good. I don't like Power Whip plain, but once we factor it up, it'll be great. So here's another thing I want to mention. I want plain whipped cream for garnish in the recipe that we're going to be making. So what I would do normally, the recipe calls for 2 cups of whipped topping, whipped up. If you want extra plain whip for garnish, I would tell you to pour a little extra into the bowl and then take it off after it whips. However, in my previous demo also, I used Power Whip for something else, and I have that ready to go. So I'm not going to do that. But if you're cooking along with me, or if you're going to do this afterwards, that's very important to keep in mind. So I'm going to whip this up. I'm not going to talk while it's going because it's going to be really loud, but I'll show you what you're going to want to look for once it's ready. Okay, it's not ready, but I just want to show you because it's very important for this recipe in particular to really, really whip it until it's completely stiff. Now, if you're whipping heavy cream, you can easily over whip it. If you're whipping power whip, it's very, very hard, also called Rich's whip. It's very, very hard to over whip it. So here's where we're at now. It's somewhat stiff, but it is falling off of my spatula when I hold it. So I'm gonna keep going. Okay, so let me show you. I'm testing it. I'm not 100% sure it's ready. So, oh, I went too high. So you see here, I have it on the spatula upside down and it's not moving. That means it's ready. If you're not 100% sure, again, with power whip only, not with whipped cream, let it go another 2 or 3 minutes. It will not hurt it. And you really want it to be as stiff as possible. So I'm gonna let this go just 1 or 2 more minutes because the stiffer this is, the better, cream all over me now, the better the texture of the final dessert will be. So I'm gonna okay, so this is really bad. I have very much confidence in this. The trick that they say is that you should hold the bowl upside down over your head, and if you're not confident enough to do that, then you really need to keep whipping because that's how you know it's stiff. So let me show you what we're going to do now. So this is 2-ingredient chocolate mousse. And I'm going to talk to you about some variations once we do it. It's the easiest recipe and everyone who makes it goes crazy over it. I hope that you're making this along with me at home. Give me 1 minute, just have to pull out the second ingredient. So the second ingredient that we're using is a container of chocolate spread, a full container. So this is basically Nutella, but it's a powered version. Again, you can make it with the dairy version. If this is for a dairy meal, it'll be that much better. And so this brand is Pascal Spreadable. They sell it in my local grocery stores, but there are a number of brands that sell it, such as Schneider's Deli Nut. But the cool variation is that instead of chocolate spread, which I'm putting in here, you can use other things such as a container of caramel cream, a container of lotus spread. You can use various things to make this mousse. And then once we make it, I'm going to show you there's so many things you could do with it. So I'm just going to scrape out the whole jar. I have like this obsession.
Israeli chocolate spread?
Yeah, so it's Israeli chocolate spread. You want to use chocolate hazelnut spread if you don't have a nut allergy because it has a deeper flavor and it'll taste better. But Israeli chocolate spread will work, especially if it's the kind with the nuts. I think there's one from the brand Kazakhstan makes one. But any chocolate spread that tastes really good will make really good mousse, in essence. So I'm curious if you guys also have this, that you like obsess over getting every last drop out. So I just got every last drop out, and I'm gonna turn this on, and we're gonna whip it a little bit more gently. So instead of turning to the highest speed, I'm gonna go a little slower now to incorporate it. I'm going to share my screen now. So you see how it's turning more chocolatey. I do want to be careful because what happens when it's very uncomfortable. So what happens when you whip the cream is that you're whipping air into it. And if you do this part, if you're not gentle enough during this part of it, you can accidentally deflate the cream. Like you can let that air that you carefully whipped into it, you can let it out. So you do want to be careful. So what I do is, it's not 100% ready, as you see. Like you see around the edges, it's still white, but I finish off with my spatula just to make sure that I'm doing it gently. So this is called folding, and I'm going to just fold it until it's cohesive, the color. So once you see that it's all one color as opposed to darker and lighter brown, that's when you know that you're ready to go. What? Oh, thank you. Sorry. Ooh, okay. No, thank you. Okay. So doing it pretty gently, and using rubber spatula is really the key here. And I think, are we all in agreement that this is one? Oh no, there's a little bit there that wasn't mixed in well. I think we're good now, right? Okay, can I taste?
Miriam, is it possible to use something else other than the Hadar Riches Whip or something like that? Could you use like coconut cream or something instead?
Yes, I mean, I think so. Here's the thing. I don't play around with coconut cream for much just because I actually really, really dislike coconut. So even if people say, oh, you don't taste the coconut, I taste it. So I don't play around much with coconut. But if it will whip up, it should work. You could use dairy cream. You can use Rich's Whip. There are some brands that are supposedly a little bit less unhealthy than others. But I think coconut cream should work. So
Okay, thank you.
Sure. This is our mousse. I'm going to switch back now to the counter. I'll stop sharing. Okay. So let me show you what we're going to do now. So I'm going to load this into a piping bag. If you're not so familiar with piping, I'm going to teach you a few tricks now. So piping 101, are you ready? Do you do piping stuff? I asked you last week. Okay, so piping 101, I'm starting with a Wilton bag. Now you don't have to use Wilton, but I have found that there are some brands that are so cheap that the seams will actually split when you squeeze the bag. So even though most brands are probably fine, like to avoid that, I use Wilton. And this is also an extra large bag, which just makes things easier. I think it's a 16-inch bag. So I'm cutting off a bit of the bottom and I'm putting in a piping tip. Now, if you don't have this piping tip and you want to get one piping tip, this is absolutely the one to buy. It's the Wilton 1M. I'm not a paid spokesperson for Wilton, although I wish I was. They should totally hire me. But I love this tip because it makes everything just look really pretty. It's a large star tip. There's also an Ateco, I think it's 828 is a very similar version. So I have that in my piping bag. I'm going to fill the piping bag with mousse. Can you see? I think you could. So we're going to fill this with mousse. And I'm going to show you all the fun things we could do with it. So the first thing before we even get to piping is actually, if anyone who's watching wants to make this but find piping intimidating, I do hope that this demo will demystify it a little bit for you. But if you want to go really simple, like my sister who would never, my sister Chaya, she would not pick up a piping bag if her life depended on it. So if these kind of things are above what you normally do, you can actually take this mixture, divide it between 2 graham cracker pie crusts, stick it in the freezer, chocolate ice cream pie, easy, delicious. Every time it's a huge hit. And again, you can do this with other flavors. You can do it with lotus cream, you can do it with caramel cream. And so, it's the easiest dessert like that. But if you're willing to work a little harder, I'm going to show you some fun options. So we have it in the piping bag. Pull out my dessert tray. And here we got some goodies. So can you see? So let me show you. You know what? Yeah, you can video screen share again. You can video this. Okay, so let me just show you what I've got here. So I have some plain whipped cream, which I mentioned. It's honestly doesn't taste great, but I like it for the just visual aspect, so I only use a little bit. This is plain chocolate spread, which we may use in some things. These are some options of things to pipe it into. So I have some mousse cups here. I have some cannoli shells here. I have some mini tiny ice cream cones here. And then I have some things for textural contrast, which I'll show you next. Oh, and I also have a waffle because my previous demo was waffles. So I set one aside. So we can also do this with waffles. So, you know, let's start with the waffles. So, I mean, this is so simple. There's no rules, but I'm going to just show you in terms of piping, get it lengthwise. So this is the most important thing. I feel like you've heard me say this before. When you're piping, you're going to see I'm using two hands. I want to first say I'm a lefty, so you can reverse it if you're a righty. But this is the most important thing. I'm using two hands. This hand is only guiding. If you squeeze from this hand, you can imagine it will make a huge mess. So this hand that's on top here is doing all the piping, all the squeezing. This hand is just guiding. So this is the helper hand. This is the hand that's squeezing, and that's the most important thing if you don't want to make a mess. Now the next thing is sometimes I see people piping from way up high. That's a mistake. You also don't want to be touching. You want to be almost touching. So you want to be piping from right above it. So what you're going to do, there's a few, I'm going to actually show you, use the waffle to show you some different shapes. So one thing you can do is just squeeze it out and make a plain little star. And also if you do it a little less, you'll get different shapes just based on how much you squeeze. So you see that. The other thing that you can do, are you close enough? Mm-hmm. Is as you squeeze, you can twist your hands to make a kind of ruffle.
Okay.
Okay, maybe go a drop closer. And then the other thing you can do is make a swirl like this. So you can make a rose, or I didn't leave enough room for the swirl. I'm going to do it over these. So for a swirl, I'm going to start on the outside and go up like this to make a nice high swirl. So these are some of the shapes that you can do. Now we have a waffle with chocolate mousse on it. So again, what's the store that you shop at, like in Teaneck, the kosher grocery store? Is that Grand and Essex? Or someone speak up? Or maybe someone will talk, maybe not.
Grand and Essex, Cedar Market.
Sorry, what?
There's Grand and Essex, there's Cedar Market, there's Gladys.
So, I would assume they probably sell these, and if they don't, ask them. I'm sure they'll bring it in. These are cannoli shells. I'm going to show you the package.
I think Cedar Market has that.
Has it? Okay, good to know. So here's the package, just in case you want to know what to look for. So they're basically wafer rolls that are hollow, and you can fill them with all kinds of things. So the way that I fill them with chocolate mousse is we're going to go at it from both ends. So I'm going to start by putting the piping tip all the way in. And I'm going to squeeze, and as I squeeze, I'm going out, and then I'm going to end abruptly. I didn't do such a good job there. We'll do it better on the other side. And then I'm going to go back to the other side and do the same thing. Squeeze and pull out abruptly. So there we go. We have the cannoli. Let me do it one more time. Man, it is so hot. Okay, so I'm just squeezing it out. And going away like this. Okay. So that's the cannoli shells. Now you can also do something like this. I have a few different things here. So for example, I have these chocolate sprinkles. So what you can do is you can take this one. So you can take this, you can just kind of level it off, and then you dip it in the sprinkles. Not to be a little fuller, I guess, but that's just a pretty way to finish it off as well. The next thing you can do is make a little cone. So these are tiny little mini ice cream cones, which is good because they're like fun party sized. Remember parties? We used to have parties. And so I'm just doing a little swirl here. And I'm going to finish it off. Doesn't that look cute? Then I'll finish it off with just a few chocolate sprinkles. How cute is that? It's going to get messed up. I need like a cone holder. Okay, next I'm going to show you these mousse cups. So again, they probably sell this at Amazing Savings. They sell this at a lot of kosher grocery stores. If they don't sell it in the ones that you have locally, you can ask them. So here's the thing with something like this. I always try to think about having different textures. Like you don't want just cream, you want to have different textures. So what I like to do is to use some kind of crunch. So in this case, I have these are a version of Lotus cookies. They were sent to me by Liebers. They're pretty comparable in terms of taste. So I'm just going to crunch them up and put them at the bottom. So this is going to give me like the first base layer of texture. And then I am going to pipe some mousse on top. We'll stop there. Now I'm going to do some more cookies on top of that. And then I'm going to save this whole corner. I'm going to take my whipped cream. Remember I told you I don't like to use too much of it because it's not quite as tasty, but it just adds a pretty element of color. And then I'm going to take that little corner of the cookie and stick it right on top. Isn't that pretty? All right. I'm going to show you another version or two. So if you follow me on Instagram, you may remember that I did an Instagram live where I made various things with brownies. So I baked off the extra brownie batter and stuck it in the freezer for exactly this type of thing. Like when I'm making mousse cups and desserts and I want just an extra layer of something, I can pull it out and use it pretty easily. So I actually made this like as brownie brittle, so it's a little crispy, although it's crispier because it's straight out of the freezer. So I'm just going to put some of that brownie on the bottom. Then I'm going to top that with some chocolate mousse. Now, I'm actually going to use a little bit of this. Just a tiny little. Just make sure it's flowing. Okay. So I'm just going to. Doesn't look quite how I imagine. I'm actually going to scrape that off and start over. See, this is real life. In case you weren't sure. So I'm just going to put that back on. Nice recovery over there. All chocolate. So again, this is brownie dough, which basically means I took brownie batter and I baked it like as thin as I possibly could on a cookie sheet. And
Still for that, by the way.
Oh, thank you. Very good point. Want to come? A little more done than I might have wanted. But, blame everybody for not reminding me. No, I'm joking. Real life, like I said, it's going to be delicious. There we go. These are the, and I'll plate these up after we finish with desserts. These are the pastrami ones, those are the pepper ones. I'll plate them up soon. Let's go back to dessert for a minute. Whew, I'm going to turn the oven off. Okay, so this one is done. Should we do one more?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so got. Okay, so I'm going to use my pecan brittle crunch. Again, they sell it in my local grocery. It's basically chopped nuts and sugar. So you can just take candied nuts and chop them up. And this is what it looks like if you can get it. It's delicious, actually, very addictive. Don't start eating it because you're not going to want to stop. So I'm going to, again, fill it up with chocolate mousse. off with a little bit of whipped cream and a couple more. Some pecan brittle. Again, I'm using this not only for crunch, not only for looks, it does look pretty, but crunch is still important. Now I'm just going to show you one more because I forgot I had these. So these are mini Oreos, and I love these. They're so cute. Anything mini is adorable, right? So I'm going to actually, let's see if it'll fit, if I just stick one right at the bottom there. And that fits. So we're going to use that as the base. And some of this on top. Get a little extra chocolatiness. Okay. It's going to be a surprise. Surprises? Cute. Depends what type, right? Like chocolate surprises are good.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have that. And then I'm going to just cut this in half gently. Wasn't super successful, but I can make it work.
And is that also a Cutco knife?
Sorry, what?
Is that a Cutco knife? I'm looking for.
Oh, no, this is a super cheap knife. It's just what I pulled out first from the drawer. The truth is, if I had used the better quality knife, this would have probably gone much better. But then I, top it with another half a cookie. So these are pretty much, some options. You can obviously do so much with this, but this is really just to give you ideas. Oh my gosh, take this home for Shavuos. So here's the thing, by the way. I just told my friend she could take them home for Shavuos, and as I'm saying that, I'm realizing that I didn't mention that this is super freezer friendly. So what I would do to freeze these is stick them in an Avocado 13 pan, cover them really tightly, done. You have to make a few more though. It's not enough for your family.
Come for you, right? You make
Right.
calculate you also, right?
All right. Okay. So I'm gonna stop sharing this. I'm going to take questions about dessert, and then I'm just going to quickly put the stuff away, and we're going to plate up the potatoes. So if you have any questions about dessert, this is the time to ask.
The piping bag that you bought, you could just get that from Amazon?
Yes, absolutely. That's where I buy them. By the way, I also got these mini spoons, which are great for these mousse cups. So, ready to go. Touch it every now and then because it's on low power mode. It's annoying, but my phone's always on low power mode because my old phone. So I'm just going to put this away. Here and show you how to plate up the potatoes. Oh man, I'm running out of room. Okay.
Oh no, switch this.
I'm gonna pull these out because I thought you might want to steal them.
Actually, they want to buy one.
No, I'm not giving them to you. Wait, let's just put them close. Yeah, not screen sharing.
Yeah, you are.
No, I'm not. Was that not screen sharing the whole time?
No, you were. I just went down for a second to get this away.
So here we go. So these are the pastrami potatoes, and I mean, these really don't need much, but what I like to do is just to plate them up onto here carefully so they don't lose their topping. You want to take it home with you?
Oh,
You could have the potatoes, but not the tray.
try.
You know, when I pulled it out, I promised you, I was like, oh, I shouldn't pull it out. The was going to try to steal it.
You don't need it. You need every single.
I'll give it back when you give back that golden box. Okay, no fighting. We have an audience. In case anybody's wondering, my friend Devar here and I, we share a backyard and we share some other things also sometimes. So we're quarantining together.
Yep.
So here we go. Here's the first one. It's gonna be nice to put it burns everyone. Yeah, you like it?
Yes.
I think it would be your style. So here we have the pepper ones. I'm gonna just do these at a bit of an angle actually, just to look a little different. And if you're into these type of trays, I'm talking to Devorah, but also to everybody watching, Home Goods, every single one of them. And what's it, Flying Tiger? They're from Teaneck. They live right there. Like when malls reopen, you can all go to Flying Tiger. It's our favorite store.
Favorite store. They opened that one in Menlo.
Where's Menlo?
In Person.
That's still far.
Eh.
They're 10 minutes from the Garden State Mall. We drive over an hour to get to the Garden State Mall for important things like Flying Tiger. Okay, well, lucky Teaneck people, they can
Shopping
just
there.
have to hope that store is open. You know the last
Is
store.
like in their backyard.
What's Flying Tiger?
Flying Tiger. Has anyone here gone to Flying Tiger?
Never heard of it.
Never heard of it. It's in the Garden State Mall. It's a small store.
Tiny store.
It's almost like if you think of like IKEA, but like only for like tchotchkes. It's like small things. They're often pretty cheap. Very just cool, different,
Fun things.
funky, like really fun things.
Everything that you don't need there.
Yeah, you will not get any necessities. You'll only get things that you don't need, but that you'll really want and love. So what I'm just going to do, one last thing, is I'm going to just, you know, put some extras that fell off of the potatoes over here. Oh, this looks so good. You excited to eat?
Yeah.
Okay. Did anyone cook along with me? I hope so. Okay, so let me just recap what we've made here. So, we have the pastrami topped potatoes. We have pepper topped potatoes. We have the chicken and pepper salad. And then we've got, I'm gonna bring these. We've got our chocolate mousse cups. Has anyone, okay, one second, let me stop screen sharing. So if anyone has any questions, or if anyone has cooked, oh, why is it still, oh, here we go. No, it's good, it's good. If anyone's cooked along with me, I would love to see what they've made. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you have about this or about any of my recipes. So,
A minor question. The tip that you used, what did you say was it, what size was it? Because I see different sizes.
It's called a large star tip. The name is Wilton 1M, M like Miriam. Okay. I love to say that. But it's my absolute favorite tip. I use it for everything. It really just makes everything look stunning. So, I like, even if you're not big into piping things, it's a good like one tip to have. Just it's like all purpose. What other questions can I answer? Did anyone cook along with me? Anyone? Very quiet group.
We did. No, we did.
Let me see.
But we were running a little bit behind, so it's still in the oven.
Okay, I'm unspotlighting myself so other people can show off what they've made. So please, if you've made anything, let's see. Anyone have anything to show us? Any questions? Very quiet group.
What kind of cutting boards do you recommend? Because it looked like you were using bamboo.
Yes, I use bamboo cutting boards, and I have a bunch that I use for different things. I have a fruit cutting board, a vegetable cutting board, a chicken cutting board, a meat cutting board. My chicken one is actually is plastic, and I throw it out pretty often because, I don't know, I get grossed out from it. But I have different cutting boards for different purposes. That way, I don't worry about not only like contamination, which you would worry about with like chicken and meat and stuff, but also like, you know, that you cut fruit and you have an onion flavor. So I have multiple cutting boards, which you can sort of see in the corner there. And that's minus the few that I used tonight. So yeah, I mean, whenever I see like a well-priced one at Home Goods, I'll pick it up and throw out an old one that looks.
Is it possible to clean the wood ones like really well?
I use soap and water. I don't find that. What? There's cutting board oil. It's more to keep like the quality of them. I don't use the really expensive ones. I use the more inexpensive ones. I'm so tired. I'm not getting up right now and it's so heavy. I do have a really like heavy expensive one that a company sent me that was like, it's like they charge like $150 for it. And that one I don't use often because I haven't gotten cutting board oil. But you do, when you have like the good quality ones, you definitely want to oil it to keep it from splitting and from warping and things like that. But again, I use cheap ones and I replace them fairly often.
Okay, and can you tell us the name of the sharpener again?
Sure, it's called Any Sharp. I have a feeling, it happens to be that's the one I have. I do have a feeling that if you look on Amazon, you'll probably find 10 very similar ones under different names, but that's the one that I have. If I remember correctly, it's probably between $20 and $30. And it's great because again, if you have big knives and you don't sharpen them, that's super dangerous because they can get when they get dull and you're like pushing the knife into the food, you can easily push it into your finger instead. So definitely dull knives are probably your most risky, much more than sharp knives, even though I know people are scared of sharp knives. That's really not the risky part. So yeah, keeping your knives sharp is very, very useful and important. Any other questions? Anyone have any food to show off? I would love to see. My demo earlier today, I got tons of pictures afterwards, so I don't know if maybe you're not ready to show off your food just yet, but
the family's too busy eating it.
Okay, well, hey, that's a good sign, right? Any other questions?
Just a comment. Sorry we're not there to eat it.
Oh, I know. We're going to feast right now. I hope you're not too jealous.
Miriam, not for anything that we made tonight, but I actually happened to make one of your recipes Friday night, the barbecue honey like popcorn chicken.
Okay.
So if you wanted to serve that for Shabbos day, or if you have leftovers, how would you recommend like heating it up so it stays somewhat crispy?
Okay, so the best bet would actually be to not add the sauce to all of the chicken, but rather to either serve it on the side or add the sauce to some chicken and then replenish as needed. Because once you add the sauce, it's not going to be crispy again. Not the same way. Nothing you do will make it really crispy again. But if the sauce is separate, then A, it will stay crispy, and B, I'm not a rabbi. People ask me halakha questions. I'm very, very firm. I'm like, I don't paskin anything. But in terms of heating it up for Shabbos, definitely without the sauce, it's not an issue to heat it up. So that's another benefit. Now, in terms of the sauce, I don't know. I don't want to say anything that I shouldn't, but definitely without the sauce, it's totally no problem to heat up. So that's another benefit. So that's really the best thing to do is toss some with the sauce. If it gets finished, do some more.
It was really good.
Serve it as a dip, like serve it in two separate things. And I actually do that often when there's kids who are eating it, because sometimes the kids don't like the sauce and they'll eat the plain, like they call it chicken nuggets. So it's a double benefit, triple benefit. Any other questions? Anyone?
It's been a long day.
Yeah. Well, if you have any questions that for whatever reason you didn't ask, I don't know if you're shy or whatever, you're welcome to either message me on Instagram Overtime Cook. Join my group on Facebook. That's actually really fun because it's interactive. You know, everybody posts pictures of what they made and you get ideas. It's really nice. So that's called Overtime Cook Recipes. You can do a search for it. You'll find that. Or you can email me, overtimecook@gmail. I'm not going to say that I answer every email immediately because I do get a lot of them and sometimes I miss them, but I try very hard to answer my emails. You can also visit my website, overtimecook.com, where I have, like I said in the beginning, over 500 recipes. So there's a lot to discover if you're new to my website. And then my cookbooks, you can take a look at Real Life Kosher Cooking, More Real Life Kosher Cooking, and then my first cookbook, Something Sweet, is a dessert cookbook. So, you know, there's a lot to discover. I think that's pretty much it.
Oh, you were going to show us the measuring cups.
Thank you. Yes. Oh, and I don't even have to get up for this. This is great. Okay. So here it is. This is what I keep them in. See, I'm organized. So the set, like I said, the handles will break off. So you see this handle is broken. But I love it because, and this is 3 sets actually. One I replaced, and then, like I said, I think one when I had a bunch of people working in my kitchen, I needed more capacity. But just to give you an idea, this is 2 cups. This is 1 3/4 cups. This is 3/4 cups. This is probably 2/3. No, it's also 3/4. But there's 2/3. There's a third. So, and then it also has spoons. So the spoons are also separate. But the spoons also, there's, you know, there's a 1/4 teaspoon and a 1/2 teaspoon and a 1/2 tablespoon, which is a teaspoon and a half, which is very, very handy. It comes with some really silly, useless ones like a pinch, which I've never used. I really hope nobody ever has to measure a pinch. But it's a great set. It fluctuates in price, but it sometimes goes on sale for about $10. So when it does, I'll sometimes just buy an extra one and throw out the broken ones. It's called Prep Works by Progressive. Any other questions?
Miriam, do you keep all your baking stuff parve?
Yes. So I was actually really careful because sometimes when I'm doing a demo, I will mess up, but in my own kitchen, it's easier. So I have a lot of parve stuff, a ton of parve stuff. And yeah, so my measuring cups, for example, are almost all parve. I have like 2 dairy ones and 2 meat ones, and like that's it. Everything else is parve. All my baking pans are parve. My waffle iron is parve because chicken and waffles is amazing. I have most of my knives are parve, like besides for the ones that are specific for like chicken and meat. I keep all like my like vegetable type knives parve. So even, for example, I don't know if you noticed, because I was swapping around with different cutting boards and knives, but like when I made the pastrami mixture, I cut the onions on a parve cutting board with my parve sentoku knife. I put them into the pan and I switched gears. I pulled out the fleishig cutting board and I cut the pastrami with my fleishig knife. So I find it easiest to do everything possible in parve and then only use my meat and dairy things for whatever has to be meat or dairy. But I mean, it's extra work because I only have one dishwasher and it's fleishig. So sometimes, you know, I wonder if I don't use fleishig for everything.
Do you have a chicken and waffle recipe on your website?
I do not. I should. Maybe for Shavuos I'll do that. I do have a recipe. So really, I'll tell you the shortcut. Firstly, if you don't own a parve waffle maker, which I know many people don't. I have 2 because I'm crazy and I'm obsessed with waffles. Before I had 2, I had 1 and it was parve, and then I got a second one and it's milchig. But if you don't have one, you could just buy frozen waffles. I happen to think homemade waffles are 1,000 times better, but you know, it is what it is. So you can buy frozen waffles as the base, or you can, if you do have a parve waffle iron, you can make any basic waffle recipe and just use non-dairy milk. That's actually what I did at my demo earlier today. And what I do, and maybe I'll try to post this on my website, but basically what I do to make a waffle recipe, to make it for a savory dish, is basically cut the sugar in half. Like I don't leave the sugar out completely because you need a little bit of it for the texture, for the color, for various reasons, but I cut it in half. And I usually, if it calls for, my my waffle recipe calls for 2 teaspoons of vanilla extract. So I cut that to like a half a teaspoon or a teaspoon just because you don't want too much vanilla. So that's the base. And then really the chicken, what I do is I just make poppers. So like the honey barbecue chicken poppers that someone mentioned are fantastic to use on chicken and waffles. I do have like maple bourbon chicken popper recipe, which again, maybe I'll get around to sharing on my website for Shavuos, but really you can make any kind of chicken poppers. I do think the traditional way to do it is bone-in chicken, but I find it so much easier. A, I find it easier to make it with poppers, and B, for an appetizer, what I do is I cut the waffle into the quarters because my machine makes the round waffle that makes the 4 sections. So I'll cut it into quarters and I'll put a few poppers on each one, and it's just a much more presentable appetizer than like a whole big piece of chicken with the bone in it. So that's basically
Sounds good.
instructions. But listen, if you see chicken and waffles on my recipe, on my website coming up in the next couple of weeks, you'll know that it was because of this demo. Any other questions?
Thank you so much, Miriam. Thank you, Gabrielle and Debbie, for organizing all these wonderful events for all of us. It's so nice to see everybody.
Thank you so much.
Wish we were in person. It's fun to see you all like this. Hi, Renee. She's in Florida.
Thank you.
It was really
Thank
great.
you so much.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
Okay, hopefully we'll get to a point you'll come back in person.
Yeah, that would be so fun.
The link will, if you missed anything or you want to review, the link will be available at bethaaron.org/Torah, probably within the hour.
And Elisa, thank you so much for helping and organizing.
Yes,
Always
thank you,
a pleasure.
Elisa.
Always a pleasure.
Thanks, Eliza.
Good night,
Take care.
everybody.
Good night.
Thank you.
Good night. Thank you.